As a result of the Mexican-American War, a third of Mexico's territory was handed over to the Americans as part of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. The floodgates of old European-based religions opened, and Santa Fe was to be transformed. Since the first arrival of the Spanish settlers and through the Mexican era, Catholicism was the only religion. In fact, the Mexican Constitution of October 4th, 1824 stated, "The religion of the Mexican nation is and will permanently be the Roman Catholic Apostolic religion." The first Protestant church was the Baptist church built at Fort Marcy in 1847. Since Catholicism had been entrenched in New Mexico for almost 250 years, the Baptist church had a hard time converting people. By 1869, they decided to pick up stakes and leave the state. They sold their church and property for $300 to the Presbyterian Church. The Presbyterian Church quickly realized that if they were to succeed in New Mexico, which was predominantly Spanish-speaking, that they needed Hispanics in leadership roles at the church. The missionary Gabriel Rendon was responsible for recruiting the large Spanish population of northern New Mexico. He was the first New Mexican Hispanic ordained a Presbyterian minister, and he presided over the Spanish-speaking congregations in the region for more than 60 years during the 19th and 20th centuries. He was also the first person of Spanish descent to be elected moderator of the Presbyterian Synod of New Mexico. Reverend Mcfarland, a Presbyterian minister, performed a marriage ceremony for Catherine Mccarty and William Antrim on March 1st, 1873, in the sanctuary of the church in Santa Fe. It was a second marriage for Catherine, who had been widowed 9 years earlier. Her 2 sons, Henry and Joe, stood witness at the ceremony. After her first husband died in New York City, she had taken the boys west, where she met William Antrim. Catherine had severe advanced tuberculosis, and she knew that her new husband loved the boys and would care for them if anything happened to her. After the wedding, they moved to the drier climate of Silver City. She prayed that her sons would lead a Christian life. Catherine Mccarty died a year later when Henry was 15. He was close to his mother, and her death led him to a life of petty theft and pranks around town. After stealing clothes from a Chinese laundry, he was incarcerated but escaped through the jailhouse chimney. That was the beginning of his life as a criminal in New Mexico and Arizona, where he became known as Billy the Kid. Holy Faith of Santa Fe is the oldest Episcopal church in New Mexico. It was founded in 1863 with lay people conducting services. Some of the early worshipers were the Anglo soldiers and officers stationed in Santa Fe during the Civil War. Within 5 years, the small congregation became the parish of the Good Shepherd. The name was later changed to the Church of Holy Faith to reflect the English translation of Santa Fe. In 1869, L. Bradford Prince began raising money for the building of the church, which was completed in 1882. Prince became the governor of New Mexico in 1889, and church-related functions often took place in the reception room of the Palace of the Governors. He would also conduct services when there was no pastor. His wife, Mary Prince, also assisted at these church functions. In October of 1850, the Methodist minister, the Reverend EG Nicholson, arrived in Santa Fe from Independence, Missouri, and preached his first sermon to a small congregation that consisted of military personnel and their families. It was a short-lived ministry because the headquarters of the Army soon relocated. By 1865, the Colorado Conference of the Methodist Episcopal Church had sent the Reverend John L. Dreyer to New Mexico. In 1872, the Reverend Thomas Harwood was appointed as the superintendent of the Methodist Mission in New Mexico. In 1868, the church merged with the Evangelical United Brethren Church and became St. John's Methodist Church. 36 years after the arrival of the American troops in 1846, the following religious organizations were featured in this 1882 bird's eye view of the city of Santa Fe: the Cathedral of St. Francis of Assisi, the Sisters of Loretto Convent and Academy, St. Michael's College, the San Miguel Mission Church, the Congregation Church, Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, the Methodist Church, the First Presbyterian Church, and the Holy Faith Episcopal Church. The Mormons' first arrival in Santa Fe was during the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 1848. The Mormon Battalion is the only religious-based unit in the military history of the United States. The volunteer unit consisted of 560 men who were led by Mormon company officers. At the time, they were seeking government aid for their migration west after the murder of their leader, Joseph Smith, and his brother Hiram in 1844 in Nauvoo, Illinois. Brigham Young, the second in command, devised the effort as a way to get them to Utah while creating positive public relations. Each man was paid $42 for a year of service. The Mormon Battalion Monument is located south of Santa Fe on Interstate 25. The first Mormon ward of Santa Fe opened on December 14, 1896, under the direction of the Apostle John W. Taylor. Missionary work was soon established in the remote villages of northern New Mexico. Like the Presbyterian Church, the Church of Latter-day Saints realized that they needed to recruit Hispanic members in order to grow their congregation. Rebecca Ann and Guillermo Duran were the first New Mexicans to be converted to Mormonism. 3 years later, 3 more members of the Duran family were baptized. One of the first orders of business for the mission district was to have the Book of Mormon translated into Spanish. The project was completed in 1929 by the Zion Publishing Company of Independence, Missouri. The company printed 10,671 copies of the book to aid the Duran family in their missionary work. Like the Mexican-American War of 1846 that brought a new breed of spirituality to Santa Fe, the Civil War brought Freemasonry. In 1909, Harper Cunningham, a private in the Union Army and also the Attorney General of Oklahoma, arrived in Santa Fe. A member of the Freemason organization, he began work on establishing a chapter for the Masons. Although Freemasonry is not a religion, the Masons believe in a supreme being and work for the betterment of society. This procession was held on Washington Avenue in 1911 as the Masons and the Shriners were preparing to lay the cornerstone for the Scottish Rite Masonic Temple. Masonry symbolism is represented on the back of the dollar bill. The design for the Great Seal of the United States, which features an eye and a pyramid, was introduced by Benjamin Franklin, who was a Mason. On July 4, 1776, the seal was created by an order of the Continental Congress under the direction of Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams. The seal was used as a government stamp for official business until 1935. During the Great Depression, at the behest of Franklin D. Roosevelt and Henry A. Wallace, both Masons, the Great Seal appeared on the back of the dollar bill. The Latin sentence surrounding the unfinished pyramid states, Annuet Coptis, Providence has favored our undertakings. At the bottom, Novu Ordo Seclorum means a new order of the ages. That symbolism correlated with Masonry ideals. The pyramid is a worldly achievement that's incomplete without the blessing of providence. During the Renaissance, occultists viewed ancient Egypt as the source of primal, ageless wisdom transcending nations and dogma. The eye in the pyramid sought to achieve that ideal. It took half a century, but under the leadership of Dr. E.B. Atwood, the corresponding secretary of the New Mexico Baptist Convention in Albuquerque, the First Baptist Church of Santa Fe was formed on August the 20th, 1917, with 23 members. The momentum grew out of evangelistic meetings held in a tent that were the first tent revivals in Santa Fe's history. For 10 days, they held services in a large tent that was borrowed from the Baptist State Office on a lot located at Manhattan and Don Gaspar Avenues. In 2017, the First Baptist Church, who were the first Protestants to arrive in Santa Fe, celebrated 100 years in the capital city. That same year, the First Presbyterian Church, the second Protestant church to arrive, celebrated 150 years in Santa Fe, the city of Holy Faith.